And here we
Boom.
go.
Hey, we gotta figure out how to do a virtual fist bump.
Okay, okay. Look, look, look,
One,
look, look at, no, no, no,
oh,
look at
oh,
this.
oh,
Okay,
wait, wait.
okay, wait. Okay.
One, two,
One, two,
three,
three.
boom.
Boom.
This is so dumb.
So
Oh man, we got to keep that up. Hey, so
it
so
is.
coming to you
It
in a
is. It
different.
is. It is Jason and Caesar. Must
Right.
be dumb.
That's right. That's right. Coming to you in a different format now. Those of you who have been around ANC for the last couple weeks, or the last couple months, know that Caesar and Ala and the boys had to move back to Chile.
Yes.
We came to the end of our church planting funds, and Amor Original is launched in the virtual space, and they're going to run that from their hometown in Chile. So, in order to continue to do our Sunday leftovers, we had to come up with a different format. So hopefully this format is pleasing enough. I doubt I'll be shooting it live from radio, which is kind of a bummer, but it just seems better to do the Wi-Fi from the house. Caesar, give us a quick update on what's up with y'all.
Well, last week we just flew from Austin, and it was quite an adventure. And Jason knows all the details, and I will give you some of those details. It was an adventure and a challenge since the beginning, because our plan was to fly with our dogs. And I know for so many people that sounds really dumb, and could be in my older version. Yeah, I wouldn't consider to do that. But those dogs have been with us since Mexico. One of them is 10 years with us. So it's the dogs of our lives.
Yeah, I
So-
don't get it. It's and part of your commitment to your children when you
That's
move
right.
them around is that they have to offer some continuity, and so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So that was an adventure, and as soon as we arrived to Chile, also there was another adventure trying to take the dogs from the customs.
Yeah.
Anyway, good thing is finally we are here, and we are surrounded by good people. And at the airport, actually, some people from Amor Original was there.
Oh, fantastic.
Receiving us and providing some vehicles to transport us, which was so
That's great.
nice. That's great. So we are here now in Chile. We will run Amor Original online from here, and
Right.
we will try to be very connected with
Yeah.
ANC also, doing all kinds of interaction and work. And Sunday leftovers is one of the things that we
Yeah.
wanted to preserve. So
Right.
here we are.
Yeah, so Caesar will still be working with ANC in the graphic space. He'll still be zooming in for staff meetings as needed. Today, for example, he did. And then he'll still be doing some work for Help One Now. So we're going to continue the things we're invested in. And maybe in the end, this will all have just been something, a fun memory to laugh about. But it was not fun last week on the way to the airport with 2 truckloads of suitcases to get these guys all the way back. But
I don't know
So-
anybody flying with that amount of bags.
I mean,
Suitcases.
the U.S. Army, maybe.
Maybe. For those that
All right.
maybe you don't know, guys, 25 suitcases plus carry-ons plus backpacks plus 2 dogs.
Yeah. Well, it's good thing is you made it. The good thing
It's
is you
real.
made it. And
Yeah.
Good thing you didn't get there and they offer you 2 little crates with cats in it. Right? If your dog somehow became cats on the trip.
Yeah.
So we celebrated the Feast of Pentecost on Sunday in our
Yes.
own way, and Pentecost is it's a funny little church date. It's the last stop now before we head into what we call mean time or green time, or what I like to call ordinary time. We'll be in ordinary time now all the way up to the beginning of the work of Advent again towards the fall, and so Pentecost is the day that, as some of you already know and some of you don't, it's traditionally understood as the day the church was born. And but I don't know that I love that sort of thinking, because
Yeah.
I don't know that Jesus gave birth to a church. I don't know that Jesus looked at the world as church and not church, or people that are part of church and people that are not part of church. It's a little self-serving to celebrate the day that the disciples and friends of Jesus were empowered literally to preach the gospel in every language, it's a little self-serving to look at that and say, it's the day we were born. I would rather look at that and say, no, it's the day the message found the power to project itself where it was going to go anyway, with or without the church.
Right.
So I don't know if it's the birthday of the church so much as it's that moment they were told to wait for, in hopes that they would understand that one missing link. And I've said this a bunch over the last couple of weeks, and I really do mean this. The resurrection wasn't powerful enough to initiate world mission. Neither was the ascension.
Which is something, if you put a pause there,
Yeah.
that is something very weird. I mean, those are like super powerful things, but
Yeah.
there were not enough.
Yeah, and we often look at resurrection as sort of the centerpiece of all of it, but the response of the friends of Jesus to the resurrection was hiding and paralysis and fear.
Right.
And so what I love about the 50-day period between Easter and Pentecost is that Jesus took his time. He took his time with the disciples and gave them what they needed, apparently. And so anyway, Pentecost is that interesting day. You may be able to piece into what my comments on Pentecost, that I do have a deep history in the Pentecostal church. Now, some of you know my story involves lots of different things. I am Methodist by choice, but I was Pentecostal by early affiliation of my family in the mountains, in the Appalachian Mountains in Tennessee. And then the missionary movement that we were part of in Mexico was deeply Pentecostal or charismatic. And so as I went back and listened this morning to the sermon on Sunday, I have an axe to grind around the subject of Pentecost. And basically what that is, if you couldn't piece that together, it was simply, this was not the moment everyone went goo goo gaga speaking in tongues, as if that's the empowerment. Wait, my struggle with my deep history in the Pentecostal charismatic church is that even that gift of speaking in tongues was very much an internal thing, and it created a top tier and a bottom tier of believers. And that misses the entire point of Pentecost, which was people from all over the world understood the language of the friends of Jesus. They had been empowered by the Spirit of God to speak things in their language that were always true in their language anyway.
Right.
But it's the sending, it's not the receiving, so that we can now go goo goo gaga and somehow pray words that are... Glossolalia is not the gift of Babel, it's the languages of the people. And so if you don't know my story, and that's maybe irrelevant to many of you, I do have some history and some trauma, and my early days in faith were in a white-hot, super emotional, sort of always explosive Pentecostal space, and so a lot of my theology is in response to that. So that's just part of me. We also do know that the Pentecostal sector of the Christian church is arguably growing faster than any other sector of the church around the globe. And so these are not things to laugh at. People who interpret this scripture this way, this is not something to make fun of. There's a connection in the emerging world as they've taken ownership back of how to do Christianity. There's a connection to a kind of very emotive, very dramatic way of embodying faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
And actually, it's quite effective in countries like Latin America. And we received that actually from missionaries from the United States. And I look back to my tradition because I was born in the Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
So my grandfather was a pastor in the Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
So I have quite respect for that tradition. I see all the bad thing too, not just from outside, but because I experienced those bad things. I experienced what you said about that if you speak in tongues, you are in this level, you are allowed to do this and that. If you don't, you're not. I've been there in those youth camps in where the first day people said, okay, after this camp, everybody will speak in tongues.
Yeah.
And you were so afraid that you are not speaking in tongues. So in the middle of the week, you said something like, I don't know, Lanza llama quema rama seca, and you're done. And they're happy with that, even though that wasn't true.
Yeah.
Anyways, It's
Yeah,
very
it always
weird
it was
thing.
an interesting thing that you could fake it, right? All you got to do is say
Right.
Mitsubishi, Nishiki, Honda, and you're good, right? Just name
Right.
the next 10 Japanese car companies, and you're all golden. And it's such a funny thing because again, this is why I don't love history split into the era of the church and then everything that came before, is because the church is so completely misplaced the meaning of Pentecost that I don't
Right.
even trust church folk anymore with these sorts of things.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's like we had that in our Pentecostal tradition. That
Yeah.
that factor. Okay, if you speak in tongues, you're here. If you don't, you're here. But then I realized that in every tradition we have something like speaking in tongues that
Yeah.
put people in the upper tier
Yeah.
or below. I mean,
Right.
for some reason, I'm making fun of that reality because I faced that. But to be honest, even in the academic world, when someone quotes a theologian that nobody respects, but maybe is saying something true, everybody is making fun of them because
Yeah.
you are quoting this, you're so dated,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
We
It's-
always
yeah.
find a way to put people up and other down.
Yeah, it's not as if you're not in the Pentecostal church, then tiers of exclusivity and elitism don't exist. Of course they do. This is what we make of all of these things. But
Yeah.
anyway, so a lot of my comments on Pentecost are really a recovery of something more global and universal than what I was taught it would be growing up, and then of course going to a Pentecostal Bible school fresh out of high school. But the interesting thing, as I've thought about it today, is, and I had this conversation with the dear sweet Bishop of Arkansas, who's a good friend of mine who used to be our DS down here in Austin. And she and I were discussing this before Sunday, and she says, the interesting thing about the people in the upper room being empowered to speak in these languages was that it wasn't up to them to learn the language so much as the Spirit gave utterance to these things. And so as we've kind of moved in the direction of something practical, where we're going to begin to ask the question as a church, how do we now, in our neighborhoods, go back and re-embody the life of God and the message of the gospel? How do we do that again? It can be overwhelming because that very next step as a pastor is, okay, so what are we going to do? And my first sensation is, I don't know exactly how to decode all the languages of all the people in Austin, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so I guess I woke up this morning just being reminded that it's the Spirit that speaks the language of people. Our job will be to make ourselves available to that. So it's a different thing than us saying we've got to go master everything. No, we have to be willing to speak of what we've experienced, and anyone can do that, right?
Right.
Anyone can do that.
I mean, I think that's the challenge of Pentecost.
Right.
It's like the challenge is the church must speak in tongues again.
Mm-hmm.
But, those tongues of the culture, of the other
Right.
people. And
Right.
and maybe that requires the biggest miracles of all, which is put yourself beside and be open to connect with someone else.
Right.
Today, generosity, connection, all of those things are huge miracles in a society that just people just think about themselves. So for me, that's a huge miracle that the church needs to embody again.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, that's the resurrected Christ.
Right.
Is the church living that experience, which is so powerful.
And somehow, even the message of Jesus coming through death to new life, and even the message, to whatever degree it was integral to the gospel, of Jesus floating away on a cloud, as Luke sort of argues,
Right.
even those things are not enough to motivate people to go out into the world with this experience until they realize that it's the Spirit of God that leads them there. So the impulse to hive in and step away from is what's being solved in Pentecost. And that, of course, is the beginning of every dead end the Christian church has ever pursued theologically or ethically or socially. Every dead end has been the result of circling up and hiving in and collapsing in and trying to purify. It was never that. I will never forget when Elise Snipes, my great friend from California at radio, sat and told me to my face, she says, I just don't see the world as church and not church. I'll never forget that thought. And I've kind of rewound that over the years. It's been 5 years since she probably told me that. But the church is never going to find the Spirit of God that moves it out when it does this. And so what can this be? Well, this is, we do it better. We're smarter. We do the worship right. We don't believe those things. We ordain LGBT people. We ordain women. We do these things.
We.
That's right. Everything we do that circles us in and removes the polarity of direction that goes from us out into the world, every one of those is going to be a dead end, every single one. And as much as I would like to say, as a progressive pastor in a progressive church in a progressive city, that we're over those dead ends, we're on a few of those ourselves too. Let's be honest. All things age, all new things become old. And we're going to have to hold this all as loosely as we can. And so Pentecost fell at just the right time. So we're looking now forward. We're going to be talking on baptism this week, and then we're going to be moving into some new practical directions in the summer. More about that as we go. But Caesar, it's great to see your face.
It was great to see you too, also, Jason. And I really enjoyed the sermon. Believe me or not, I listened to the sermon.
Ah, well, you might get saved one of these days. Highly doubtful.
It was very nice.
Okay. All right. Well, we will see you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Wait, it's this way. Right. Fist bump.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.